I'm actually going to be speaking next to the work that I have done in plastic pollution activism, which didn't really start as activism. I think by now everybody knows that plastic pollution is a problem, that there's an enormous amount of plastic in the oceans and that ends up on the beaches, and often ends up on the beaches of underserved communities. And even in those communities, if there are hotels that are for richer people that come in, the plastic is removed off those beaches onto the beaches of the locals. So there's a real issue there that I'm not going to address, but you're all aware of it. I wasn't aware of it 15 years ago when I first went onto the beaches. Everybody nowadays, I think, as a result of it, feels guilty. And when they deal with plastic, we all deal with plastic all the time. And it's really hard to consolidate how we feel about plastic and the fact that it's forced upon us. And therefore we duly recycle, but only 9% of recycled plastic is actually reworked into other products, and the rest still ends up in landfills and other places, and a lot of it still ends up in the oceans and through rivers and all that. The pandemic, of course, has created a huge surge in plastic use. I mean, the gloves, the shields, the masks are even made of plastic. All that stuff. Apparently in Wuhan, they don't even know what to do with it. There was so much of it. It's added. The other problem is that because oil prices have come down, because our oil consumption, gas consumption is less because of the pandemic, new plastic has become cheaper, and therefore recycled plastic is not used as much as it should be and was before. And so, having said that, I think I'll just take you back through my journey with the plastic and how it started. And it was kind of in a romantic way that it started. I'm going to show you, I'm going to share my screen if I dare again. I don't think this thing will freeze. Here, where are we? Where's my screen share button? Is there. There's the desktop. And this is full screen. Okay. So this is in book form. Since I'm a bookmaker, I thought it would be a nice way to show you how my journey through this. So as I said, 15 years ago, I walked on the beaches of Eleuthera, and it was raining. We were there on vacation for 3 months, and it was pretty much like this all the time. So I did an enormous amount of beach walking. And as I walked along these beaches, I noticed that in the surf line, as you see it there at the top, there was plastic. And at first I thought, well, that color looked kind of pretty because it didn't register. It was one of those things that if you don't know it, then it takes a while to know what you're seeing and relate to it. And so my first initial reaction was, oh, how pretty, all those colors. And then I looked closer, and the picture on the left shows you what happens when the wind blows the top layer of sand off. That's the amount of plastic that is on beaches. So it's actually a percentage of the sand nowadays is plastic. At that point, I was horrified, but at the same time, I was still attracted to it as a material. Because plastic is something that is man-made, and it is always there to follow a human function. And once it's been thrown away, especially single-use plastic, there's so much of that, it takes on an interaction with nature, and through the interaction with nature, it becomes something other. As you can see in these photographs, I mean, these are all, I just became fascinated with the way it interacted, and sometimes became part of nature. It would almost look natural and quite beautiful, which of course, maybe I shouldn't feel or say, but I was fascinated by that. Eggs and the, Will, do you want to mute your, yeah, thanks. So these are some photographs of plastic and nature interacting in a very photogenic way. obviously, as I was seeing this, the more I saw it and the more I went back, the more I realized what a problem it was. But when you Googled 15 years ago, beach plastic, nothing came up. Now, of course, you get pages and pages and pages. So there is something to be said for bringing a problem to the foreground through beauty, which is how I saw it. It's what people relate to. Guilt is often not a great way to make people understand the situation, but beauty can help. So I started to collect all this plastic and brought it all home to my studio, didn't know what to do with it, and eventually slowly started making pieces with it. On the left, you can see that literally every single color of plastic can be found on the beaches, and that's why I created that rainbow, just to show a full palette. It's a little bit Pantone. I guess maybe that's why I was so motivated to do this. Not every color has a name, but there it is. And then on the other side, is a necklace I made out of the rope. The fishing rope that's on the beaches, and obviously there are many different colors and many different ages. It's a necklace I did for an exhibition, a Dutch exhibition at the Wolfsonian Museum in Miami. So I started making a form of jewelry with the material because I didn't know what else to do with it. I was pretty much in love with the material at the time. And so this is a very classic design necklace. And I started, but then we went back to Eleuthera at some point. A friend of mine had opened a little shop on the beach, and she asked me to do a whole collection. So that was really the first time I started thinking of it as something that I could actually retail. Up to that point, I was finding my way with the material, and the activism didn't really come until later. First, I had to connect with my creativity and the possibilities of recycling this material, which was also a new experience for me to recycle in this way. I'm not the kind of person that walks along the beach and normally, ends up making things out of it. So this was all new to me and a process of discovery. The bikini top I particularly like because a woman bought it at that shop at the beach house and wore it and lay on the very beach where I had picked up the plastic. So it kind of came full circle. And those were all little moments when I realized that this was actually could be quite powerful. My work was, I don't know what exactly the order was, but at some point I got a phone call from somebody in Abaco who was opening a new, what's it called, like an ecological community. And they wanted me to come and teach, to go to the beach with the local schools and pick up the plastic and teach them how to make things with the material. These are just a few more examples. I did this right after the Me Too movement and the Women's March. All these women, yeah. And these are some more pieces. I'm just going to flick through now to the education aspect of the, this was the moment when I thought this is a problem, the plastic pandemic. We moved to a house on the beach in Miami, and I decided that every morning I would clean the same 200 yards of beach of plastic. And after 2 months, I had all this plastic. So the plastic is what I got after 2 months. And I always collected it in a little paper bag. So then in the gallery over Art Basel, I projected how much plastic I would gather if I did it for a full year. So the bags represent a full year. And it actually goes on much deeper than this into the gallery. And then I also calculated that if you took the plastic out over a year and you did the full length of Miami Beach, that you would actually be covering 3 blocks of windward in the plastic. So this is when I realized that me making cute, beautiful things with the plastic was never going to make any difference or ever going to make an impact on the environment. And that's when I, through this gentleman that invited me, started teaching workshops. So we would go with groups of grown-ups and kids onto the beaches and I would take them back. We would gather the plastic. We would go back to the whatever, the schools, the library, the community center, whatever was available, and I would teach them how to make the kind of things that I had been making. And that was for me really a revelation of possibility, because now I was interacting with people that actually went through the same experience I did, which was, what is this? A lot of the reactions were, ew, this is disgusting. And then we cleaned it, gathered it together, put it out. I would have the trimmings with me for the jewelry. And at some point the room just goes quiet and they connect to their inner creativity, and a change takes place. And the change is all about going from a negative reaction to a moment of opportunity, a possibility, something new and other. It's a shift in paradigm, it's a shift in perception. And that's why I kept doing it, because I felt that that's where I could use the plastic as actually a game changer. And it became activism. And so my storytelling started happening around these amazing people in the workshops who made beautiful work, and then took it out into their communities and sold it in the local tourist stores back to the tourists who basically had contributed to the plastic on the beaches from their communities in developed countries where we overconsume it. I did this everywhere. I was even invited to Scotland. You can see the lower left picture is on the beach in Scotland. The kids are wearing thick sweaters. And the top one was the first workshop in Abaco. And the top right is the Deep Creek Middle School, where Will Simmons was the art teacher. And that's when we met. And Will is waiting in the waiting room to have a conversation with me. I'm just quickly going to run through a little bit on Will. This is a workshop Will and I did last Christmas, not this COVID Christmas, but the one before, which also took place 3 months or 2 months after a hurricane hit Abaco. And it actually hit the community where I did my very first workshop. And this was obviously a disaster. It was the largest hurricane to ever hit the Bahamas, to maybe make landfall anywhere in the Caribbean. The whole community was wiped out. People were homeless, lots of people died. And so we used the ornaments we made with the kids in the workshop. And Will's brother has a wonderful hotel on Harbour Island, and he gave them as gifts to the very wealthy guests for their Christmas dinner. And we raised money that way. So he paid us for the ornaments, and then that money went back to the Abaco community. So again, it came full circle, which are moments that I love. So this was done at Will's school, and Will speak to the school more, but I'm just going to take you through some of the photographs of his school. It's called the Harbour Island Green School. Education is the most powerful weapon. We have to change the world. This is what I learned through the workshops, that these young people were really the way to the future. I have one student in particular called Crystal Ambrose, who has gone a very long way with a very initial idea in one of my workshops. These are the kids in Will's school. This was one of the youngest boys, and he could tell us what kind of Superman that was. He was amazing, the fantasy life he created around this. That is the entry to the school, very inspiring. This is one of their sculptures they did on the lawn. More pictures, and then the very last picture I love, which is now obviously during COVID, and it's Will at his health checkpoint, making sure that the kids that come in have masks and shields and are healthy. This is Crystal here in the upper right photograph, and I just want to read you. They have the Monthly Green, which is the Harbour Island Green School's newspaper. And I just want to read you one entry by Sophia Spicalia. It's a hard name, last name to pronounce. But anyway, the Green School is a school that does not allow single-use plastics because it is polluting our world. We are making a change one step at a time. We do a lot of beach cleanups before the plastic can reach our beautiful oceans. The Green School is a small school made up of 7 teachers and 27 students, starting from preschool to grade 9. All these grades have different names, such as mangroves, seagrass, coral reef, and pelagic zone. In this school, we do field trips to learn about plastic pollution and how we can stop it on our island. With the upcoming ban of single-use plastics, January 1st, 2020, which Crystal had a lot to do with, we are sure we can do this. The Green School is an eco-friendly school and we are proud of it. And then I want to show you the students along the waterfront by their school and Bill's favorite quote, which is, to build paradise, we must each tend to our corner of the garden. And with that, I introduce you, Will, who is already on your screen. I'm going to stop the share and welcome Will. You have to unmute yourself.
I was muted, sorry. Good afternoon again, everybody. Good afternoon, Barbara. Good afternoon to everybody who's here. What an exciting event.
Hi, nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
So shall I lead in with a question?
Because go wild.
Yeah, we first met 8 years ago when you were teaching at the Deep Creek Middle School, and you were affiliated with the Island School, who had brought me down, and I was working with their students. Do you want to tell a little bit about that week and that day when we first met and what we did?
I would love to. Let's just start by taking a deep breath.
You always make me deep breathe.
That's for my own nerves, but I'm sure, you know, people may have been sitting for a little while, and so it's always good to re-oxygenate your brain. But Barbara, you're absolutely right. You met at the beginning of my career as my formal teaching career. It was in my first year in the classroom. I was working at Deep Creek Middle School at the remote southern tip of Eleuthera, which was a school affiliated with the Island School. And at the time, it was my first year in the classroom, and I was taking myself very seriously, and I felt a great sense of urgency with the task of education. And I was told that a lady was going to come to my classroom to take us on the beach to make jewelry out of garbage. And I was a little confused and puzzled and amused, and maybe a little bit skeptical. But what I'd like to say to everybody here is sometimes it's the smallest moment that you're not expecting that can take you down a journey that you never expected to go on. And that was one of the first steps in a really powerful journey of creativity, synchronicity, and activism that I'm so thankful for. So that's what I can remember. You know, you turning up and carrying us out on the beach, and we just looked at a place we knew well in a completely different way.
And how did the students react, do you feel, at that time? And what did they say afterwards? Were they changed by it in your experience? Because you stay with them, I don't, I disappear.
I think absolutely. I think that what happens when you leave the 4 walls of the classroom and you go out into the environment, the mind comes awake in different ways. And so I can just remember the kids out there on the beach running around and just being excited we're going to find plastic. That's what we're doing. Okay, let's find it. And I can remember running around, and they would all these, it's amazing what you find on our beaches. It's just, it comes from all over the world. You know, we find art objects from Haiti, objects from West Africa, Spain,
Japan, right?
Japan, yeah, exactly. We find
Korea,
all sorts of things. And the kids were so excited to just find the objects initially, but then going forward and to say, well, okay, this is junk. Like, what can we do with it? And it takes the mind of an artist like Barbara who says, well, let's categorize it, let's sort it, let's look at the shapes, let's look at the colors. And suddenly, you know, you're painting, but you're not painting with acrylics or watercolors, you're painting with discarded plastic on your beach, and you're still creating beautiful images and works of art. And so that was just really cool. I think for the students to say, well, you know, you can, if you change the way you look at something, you can create anything out of it. And that allegory, you know, holds through not just in art, but in our lives and the situations we find ourselves in. And that's how it transformed me and many of the students who participated, you know, including, you know, my colleague Crystal, who has gone on to be, you know, one of the cornerstones of the anti-plastic movement.
Right. Yes. And you went on to then create Space to Create, which was a summer program initially, is that right?
Yeah, so actually, I had founded Space to Create before becoming a teacher, but it was like my gateway into education. And so my background is actually in theater. And I attended theater school in the UK. And I remember coming home, and there was this problem in our community with kids being idle in the summer. And there was a lot of speculation about, just children being unproductive and disengaged and maybe, getting into trouble. And so some friends and I had the idea of starting a camp, creative camp. And the only thing I knew how to do was theater and drama. And it grew. And then I had friends who were into art, and it grew organically. But by the time that we met, and I was working at the Island School, I had received a lot of new information about what was happening in the environment in the Bahamas, and how our ecosystems were at risk. And I came to understand how serious the issue was. And so when we went back into camp that summer, and Crystal launched the Bahamas Plastic Movement, which evolved into its own summer camp, we really started to take and marry this idea of the arts and science and activism. And at the intersection of those three things, very powerful things can happen, especially if you're working with young people, because the science alone is boring. The art is inspiring and dynamic, but people are intimidated by it. And then the activism, is riddled with emotions like guilt and anger. But if you can marry art, science, and activism together, there's this sweet spot that we always kind of talk about in our work that is transformational and joyful.
So how did you go from Space to Create and doing the summer programs? You were in the public, in the state school system, right?
Exactly. And so after a few years at Deep Creek Middle School, I said, I want this experience. I want this to expand its reach. And so I joined the Bahamas government school system at the Ministry of Education. And I worked for 5 years at two schools, Preston Albury High School in Rock Sound, Eleuthera, and North Eleuthera High School in Lower Vogue. And that was an incredible experience. It was just to go from the small setting that I was in and just to dive into those classrooms. It was an amazing experience. I think some of the most profound things were that the energy and creativity of children, particularly in that school, who had kind of been stereotyped as not having potential. What I uncovered at Preston Albury High School and what I uncover in almost every classroom that I go into is just this wealth of talent, of creativity, of capacity that the education system just kind of washes over. And we don't want to see what you can do. We want to tell you what to do. But when you take the kids out of that environment, somewhere new, into a new experience and expand their horizon, they start to come alive.
Right.
And so the experience in the public school system was very enriching. I'll never forget it. And the people who worked with us, One Eleuthera Foundation, the Eleuthera Arts and Cultural Center, these are all partners that you worked with, the Island School, the Bahamas Plastic Movement. Yeah. There was just this magic time in my life in South Eleuthera where every day was just filled with working with these young people and showing them the things that they could do. And we went far. We went to Miami, we went to Philly, we went to California, and we inspired other people. And I think that was the thing for those children in Eleuthera, some of whom had never left the island, let alone the country, who had kind of always been used to being, just not aware of their own potential. For them to have the experience of inspiring the world and their country and participating in activism with Bahamas Plastic Movement and Crystal to change policy is so empowering. Yeah. It's so empowering. So just like how you look at the plastic and you see what's possible, we kind of look at the children and then we see what's possible and then they see what's possible. Right. And now you're rolling, I'm rambling, sorry.
No, you're not rambling at all. But I also see that obviously that being in the state school system also had restrictions because they need to perform in a certain way. They probably have test scores and all that kind of stuff to deal with. So then at some point you must have decided that's the next step for you. I mean, you learned from what you didn't like and you wanted to create more opportunity, more possibility by doing what you feel is right. So you started your own school. How did that happen?
Very, very hard decision, because I had this dream, I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to be an educator, and I was, inspired by people like Dr. Janice Adams, who spoke, Dr. Maya Angelou. I had this idea of coming home to teach and taking my education and building capacity. And I wanted to be a public servant. I went to work for the government for 40 years. But after 5 years, I realized it's a system that has terminal flaws. And unfortunately, there was just too much restriction, and I couldn't see the transformation that I wanted manifesting in that system. And that is not to say that there will not always be pockets of wonderful, wonderful transformational education happening in classrooms across our system. It's necessary. Public education is the great equalizer, and it is important that we all stay engaged in it. But for me, I had an opportunity and I had to make a decision. Was I going to take the opportunity and create a pilot, create a model? And I took it, I jumped. And I was very well supported by my family, my brother, the business people here, the foundations and partners who we've worked with over the years. Everybody said, go for it. And we did. And it's just amazing. We slammed right into
too. You had such hardship. Tell them from the beginning. Like, you opened and then what happened?
I shouldn't be laughing about it, So I make the big jump, and we took over this former school campus, renovated the building, and school is set to open Monday, September 2nd. That is the day Hurricane Dorian hit the Bahamas, wiping out 25% of the country's GDP. To this day, we don't know what the death toll is. The official death toll, I think, is somewhere in the 300s, but it's estimated to be up to 6,000 because so many undocumented people were washed away by the sea. And it was the day school was supposed to start. And here you are about to start your great project, your life's dream. And you are watching people I know people in that community lose everything. I cannot describe how conflicted I felt. And it's like, what, do I stop the project? What do we do? And at that point, you just kind of kick in and intuition takes over. I think spirituality takes over. And you have to deal with what's happening right there and then. And so we just turned our classroom into a community relief drop-off site, worked with partners, everybody, the whole country went into response. And it wasn't state-led, it was horizontal. It was pervasive throughout the community, people calling one another to find their missing relatives, collecting whatever resources they could collect to put on boats and send to Abaco to bring people back. And so we just worked around.
What did your students must have learned a lot, and it must have been an instant bonding experience for your school community as well. Like, you were there, you were a center, and maybe you weren't doing geography on the first day, but what you were doing was so much more than geography, right?
Well, what we have is a memory and an experience that you can leverage for learning. And I think that's what everybody in this forum can do. Wherever you are, whatever happening where you are, you have to see it. And then you have to harness it towards these goals of hope and capacity building.
And so the same thing must have, and then the COVID hit, but the same thing, I think we've talked about this, so then 6 months later, you have COVID, and that's affecting your community. And again, you had to come up with something that was other than what you were expecting, right?
We got through the hurricane, and then we're rolling, and the students' reading is getting better. We're preparing for our Jonkanu, that's our carnival in the Bahamas, an ancient African tradition. And we have a school-wide competition. We were 4 days out from our parade, 4 days and $3,000 in, and God knows how much in our time spent building these costumes. If you don't know about John Canoe, look it up. And like 4 days out before the parade, we were just finishing our costume, slam, country closed. And at first you're thinking, okay, wow, this is crazy. And then you realize 90% of the income of Bahamians comes from tourism. And every hotel in the country is closed. And So we went from thinking about, okay, how are we going to teach our kids, you know, devices are not as common here. There's a lot of challenges in delivering education virtually. I think currently, you know, almost 30% of students in the country are not attending school regularly because of the access issues around internet and devices. But not only how are we going to teach the kids, how are the kids' families going to eat? How is our community going to sustain itself in a 90% tourism economy and a 90% import-based economy? And
so what did you do?
So we did two things. We started our curriculum. We changed our focus of the curriculum to do an at-home gardening project. Some friends came around to my house. We got the kids to start saving seeds because we didn't know what was going to happen. And everybody planted gardens. There was this whole upsurge in gardening in the country. And then, you know, things went along and you kind of realized we were made aware of our vulnerability, but we also realized we're never going to have enough food to sustain the country just through farming. And some of the people who visit our island are very compassionate and involved in our community. And they started to think about relief. And so we quickly organized a system of 11 community organizations, 9 churches, and 2 schools to create a food bank. And a friend of mine who's in fashion production, Shake Productions in New York, he knows how to produce anything. A restaurant manager who knows how to do inventory, my brother who has wholesale accounts, and a fashion icon, India Hicks, who knows how to raise money. Work together with a group called Bradland Responsible, who are interested in, you know, caring for the community. And we made a food bank, and we've delivered over 30,000 parcels to families in the last year.
Amazing, amazing.
And our kids were involved. That's the key.
And they're learning and learning and learning, and they're not
learning.
They're learning from experience, and everything that's happened has showed them that it's not that every disaster holds a possibility and a way to reinvent yourself and to bring your community together and teach each other that way, right?
And
yeah, you can have one more minute, one quick wrapping up.
Oh man, let's do it.
We're already out of time, but
I'm sorry, everybody.
No, don't be sorry. No.
Well, I just wanted to say what you said is the hallmark of resilience. You have to use whatever is thrown at you, and whatever's happened in the United States, around the world, all of the hopelessness that we feel, we have to get past that hopelessness and say, how can we harness this? How can we harness this and let it make us powerful? Because that's strength.
Yes, and opportunity, right? Opportunity for change. Yes. Yeah. Well, thank you, Will. We didn't
Congratulations to you. Congratulations to the organizers and anybody who got yourself here. You know, go forward with hope. I support you. I salute you, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.